Hello world and welcome to HaXez. The game is afoot. In this video we are going to be talking about the legendary John the Ripper. John the Ripper is a password hash cracking tool, originally developed on Unix, but it's now cross-platform and I believe it supports up to 15 different systems. It's a tool used to crack password hashes. It's developed by OpenWall and it was originally released in 1996. I believe it got its name from a previous tool that was either called Jack the Cracker or Cracker Jack. So you can see there Jack the Cracker, Jack the Ripper, and then the connection with John the Ripper. But this is my favourite password cracking tool. John the Ripper comes pre-installed on most pen testing distributions. So if you've got Parrot OS, Kali, Backbox, Black Arch, John should be installed, and you can just bring it up by just running John-H. However, if John isn't installed, you can do it by just running sudo apt-get install John. Pop in your password and that will fetch the latest version from the repos. If you're on Arch, then you would use Pacman. If you're on Fedora or Red Hat based system, then you would use RPM. Or if you don't have it in your repositories, maybe you're not using a pen test distribution, you're using like Ubuntu and for some reason it's not in the repositories, you can head over to GitHub. You can copy the URL, jump into your opt directory, and provided you've got Git installed, you can just do a git clone on the URL and that will clone John to your directory. If you can see there, I've already got it in opt, and yeah, I've got Jumbo John there. John the Ripper is a very versatile password cracker or password hash cracker. It's got a multitude of hashes that it supports, and you can see these by typing out sudo john --list equals formats. And that will show you all the hashes that is capable of cracking. And you can see there you got raw MD5, raw MD4. So it is capable of cracking a lot of hashes, and this is a particularly good command to remember as well, because if you're in an exam and you forget how to crack like a raw MD5 and for some reason John isn't able to identify the hash, you need to be able to tell it how to crack or what hash it is going to crack, and sometimes you may forget the exact wording of the type of hash that you need to tell it to crack. So if you just run sudo john list -formats or john -list equals formats, that will tell you all the available password hashes that John can crack. And then when you specify the format, when you're doing your crack, you can do -format equals raw MD5 and then feed it your raw MD5 hash, and then it will know that it's an MD5 and it will be able to crack it. John the Ripper has a number of different cracking modes. The most commonly used one, in my opinion, or the one that I've used the most, is wordlist mode. And what wordlist mode is it uses a word list, one that you've chosen to use to sort of compare the hash to. So it would go through and it would hash the words in the word lists and compare them to the hash that you fed it to see whether they match, and then that will allow you to get the correct hash or the correct password back for the hash that you've supplied. Now the word list, it can be manually made, so you could go, if you're doing a pen test for an organization, you could create your own word list using tools like Crunch, where you would use variations of things like first name dot last name and feed that into Crunch based on the employees' names which you've got from LinkedIn, and it would generate a word list for you. Or you can just head onto the internet, go to SecLists on GitHub, they've got a great set of word lists, or use rocku.txt, and then you would feed John your hash, you would tell it what word list it is you want to use, and then it would go through comparing the hash to the words in the word list, hashing those, and then that's how it would determine the correct password. Single crack mode. Now it says on the OpenWall website that this is the mode that you should start cracking with. It uses like the names, full names, users home directories, candidate passwords, and it uses something called mangling. Now the word list mode can use mangling too, but what mangling is it applies a rule set to the words in the word list, or to the sort of methods it's trying to brute force the password. And if we take a word like password, it will mangle that word and add numbers to it, or change it from a lower P to an upper P, or change the A symbol to an @ symbol, or the S symbol to a 5 symbol, and it will mangle it, trying different variations of the word list until it gets a correct one. So the single crack mode uses things based on the environment, so the first name, the home directory, and it applies a full set of mangling rules to it, and it tries to guess the password. And it's theorized, or they say here, that it's faster, that it should be faster cracking a whole list of passwords than cracking them individually, because what it will also do is it will take any password that it's guessed successfully, and it will attempt to use that password on other hashes as well. So if you've got people within the same organizations using the same passwords, then it would try that and it would be able to successfully guess it. Incremental mode. Now this is probably one of the most powerful modes there is, and it's just essentially a brute force against the password hash, and it will just go through incrementing from A, B, ABC, and going through numbers, characters, letters, all through the alphabet, all through the numericals, all through the character tables, until it finds the correct hash. Now, as we know, as passwords get longer and more complex, the time that it takes for it to do this will increase exponentially. But you can tell it the length of the password. So if you know the length of the password, say you were able to get the password complexity requirements from group policy or something like that, and you know that it has to be over 8 characters, but it can't be longer than 12 characters, you could program that or argue that into the command, so it knows when to give up, or it knows not to try sort of incrementing past that number, and that should greatly reduce the time. But this is like a true brute force mode against the password. And then you have external mode, and from what I've read and from what I've understood of this, it's where you would supply your own sort of program or your own module that you import into John. It uses a subset of the C language, and then John will compile that program on starter. Now, where I think this could be useful is if somebody's created their own sort of hashing algorithm, and you've written something to crack it in C, and then you can import it and crack those password hashes. I could be completely wrong, but again, I haven't really looked too much into this mode because I don't think it would be that useful for me. I mean, if they're using their own sort of custom password hashes at that point, then grats, I suppose. John the Ripper will automatically attempt to identify hashes when you crack them. So we can do an example of this, and we can do sudo John, and then we do -- word list for the word list we want to specify, and then I'm going to paste my path there to rocku.txt, and I'm going to try and crack this hash called hash1.txt, and you can see that it will go through it and it will say the session's done, but I don't think it actually cracked it, and we can check this by checking the John.pot, which I'll talk about later. So if we just cat John.pot, you can see that there's no password, there's no cracked hash in there, so it wasn't successful. And I can also see warning, detected hash type LMM, but the string is also recognized as raw MD5, so it's attempted to identify it, but I don't think it's been successful in actually identifying it. So what we can do is we can use other tools available to us, whether it's on the internet, on an actual program itself. And one I like to use is called hash identifier. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to cat out hash1.txt. You can see there's my string, so I'm just now going to do hash-identifier, and then it will ask me to pop in the hash. So I'm going to grab the hash and I'm going to pass it to the application or the program. I'm going to hit return, and in order of the most likelihood it will tell us what hash it is, and in this case it looks like it's an MD5. So that's how you would identify hashes. There are a lot of tools on the internet as well, on Google and things like that. Yeah, so you can use Google to search for things to identify hashes, or you can use built-in tools like hash identifier if John isn't able to identify the hash. One question that pops up quite regularly is about word lists. Where'd you get them from? How do you create them? What are they for? And whether it's brute forcing directories or sticking payloads in burp, or in this case cracking password hashes. People want to know where you get the word lists from or how you create word lists. Well, I don't see the point in recreating word lists, especially when somebody else has already done a perfect job of creating word lists. And you can see this GitHub repository by Daniel Meslier. I want to say, apologies if I said that incorrectly, but he has a great word list repository on GitHub with various different categories. So you've got discovery, so this would be like discovering URLs. You've got fuzzing, so you can put these in your intruder payloads for web requests. You've got passwords, pattern matching. I believe that would be for like buffer overflows and things like that, perhaps. Update Angular, dangerous functions, payloads, usernames, web shells. This word list is fantastic, and I've got it installed on my local machine, and I believe RockU is in here as well, along with other variations, shorter ones, longer ones. So this answers the question of where to get word lists from. You can create your own using tools like Crunch, and that's particularly useful if you're on a job and you know the organization's sort of naming conventions, a first name dot last name and things like that. And you can use Crunch to generate word lists and mangle those word lists, so you can do things like username enumeration, things like that. But yeah, this word list repository on GitHub called Seclist is great, and I'd recommend everybody get a copy and download it, especially if you're like new to pen testing. It's what I use for every single sort of job I'm on, or every video I do is this repository here has everything you need. We now know how we can identify hashes, whether it's using a tool that we found through a Google search, or whether it's using an application that we have installed locally like Hash Identifier. We also know where we can find word lists. We can search for them on Google. We know that the pen testing distributions have some built in, or we can use something that everybody uses like rocku.txt. And we now know that we have a tool that we can use to crack these passwords called John the Ripper. So with that in mind, perhaps we can use John the Ripper to crack these pesky hashes that I've just built up in my directory. Now, I will say, I was going to use the hashes from the John the Ripper Try Hack Me room. It's a fantastic room, and you should definitely check it out if you haven't already done so. However, with that said, because I've previously already cracked those hashes, I can't crack them again, and it's quite odd because I've deleted John.pot. And I've moved John.pot, and I've emptied the logs, or I've appended the logs, or truncated the logs, and I've rebooted my system entirely, but for some reason whenever I tried to crack them, it doesn't want to crack them, despite the fact that I've already got rid of the pot. I think there must be some other file somewhere, or something stored in memory that's recognizing that I've already cracked them. So with that in mind, I've created a few hashes that we can identify and crack. So let's have a look at hash1. So I'm just going to cat hash1.txt. I'm going to grab the hash, and I'm going to do hash-identifier. I cannot spell. Hash-identifier, and I'm going to paste that hash into there, and it should tell me that it's an MD5. Fantastic. So what can we do with that? Well, of course we can do sudo john --list equals formats, and we can see there that in order to crack an MD5 we need to specify the format of raw MD5. So with that in mind, we can do sudo john --format equals raw -md5. I need to change that to an equals sign. And then we can do --word list of rockyou.txt because that's our word list in that directory there. I've put it in this directory for simplicity, it will probably be somewhere else. And then I'm going to specify hash1.txt. And you can see how quick that was. I mean, rockyou's a big file, and I've actually added some of these words in manually, but you can see there, we have successfully cracked the first password hash, and it was an MD5, and the answer is never. So, let's now repeat this process for our second hash. If we just ls, and then cat hash2.txt, grab that and head to hash-identifier, paste it in there. You can see that it's a SHA-1. So what we do then is sudo John --list equals formats, and we look for a raw SHA-1. Fantastic. So then all we should need to do now is do sudo John --format equals raw SHA-1 --wordlist equals rockyou.txt, and then we specify the hash file of hash2.txt. Boom, and you can see there that it's cracked the password, and the password is in fact goner. So we've cracked hash1, we've cracked hash2, but we've still got all these hashes to crack. So I'm just going to cat hash3.txt. We're going to grab that and we're going to head over to hash identifier. We're going to paste it in, and it should tell us that it is a SHA-256. And remember what we do with SHA-256s? No, neither do I. So let's do sudo John --list equals formats, and we can see there that we need to specify a raw SHA-256 for the format. So let's do that. Sudo John --format equals raw SHA-256, and then we're going to do --word list equals rockyou.txt, and then we're going to specify the file of hash3.txt, and it's going to take a while to do that, but it's running through the hash cracking now. And you can see there that it has found the password of give. So we now have never gonna give. But we still have some hashes left. So let's cat hash4.txt and see what that is. We'll grab the hash. We'll head over to hash-identifier again. We'll paste in the results there, and it will tell us SHA-512 or Whirlpool. I already know it's Whirlpool and not SHA-512, so we're just going to do sudo John --format equals Whirlpool, and then we're going to do --word list equals rockyou.txt, and then we're going to specify hash4.txt, and we're going to let that crack, and you can see it's done that pretty quickly. And the next one is you. So never gonna give you. Unfortunately, it looks like we still have one hash left to crack. Ignore these two, they're not part of the continuity. So we've already cracked 4 hashes. Let's cat out hash5.txt, grab that and head over to hash-identifier, and it will ask us for the hash. Now unfortunately I know that this isn't gonna tell me the correct hash. It says it's an MD5, but I know for a fact it's an MD4. Again, it's a bit trial and error sometimes, but you can either try and rely on John's own hash identification system, or you can try and crack the MD5, and if that doesn't work you can move on to the MD4, whichever's next in the list, and just work down the list until you are able to crack the password. So We're going to exit out of that, and then we're going to do sudo John -list equals formats, and we're going to look for MD4, and we can see there we just need to tell it it's a raw MD4. So we're going to do sudo John -format equals raw -MD4, and then we're going to do --wordlist again equals rocku.txt, and then we're going to specify the hash of hash5.txt, and then we're going to hit return, and hopefully after a little bit of time it will tell us what the password is, and you can see there it's up. We have now successfully cracked all the passwords, all the hashes. But what happens to those hashes? Do they just get discarded? If you don't have a terminal history that goes back thousands of lines, how are you supposed to remember all these passwords that get cracked? Well, they get stored in a file called the John.pot. It's John's pot, and it's filled with passwords. And you can find this usually just by doing locate John.pot. Whoops. You may need to update your DB first. You can do sudo update DB, and that will update your file system sort of handles and tell you where everything is. But you can see there that I've got a file called John.pot, and if we grab that, we can cut it out, and it will show you every single password that you've cracked. You may need sudo though, depending on where it is. And you can see there the passwords that we've just cracked recently, and it's never gonna give you up. Okay, I'm sorry. Do you know what? No, I'm not sorry. I don't care. It was worth it. Which, honestly, I'll tell you something weird as well. I actually deleted all these hashes that I've cracked. You can see there, biscuit, kangaroo, microphone. These are the ones from Try Hack Me as well. You can see there. Yeah, I've got loads of passwords in here, and I've deleted this file, but for some reason it's repopulated it with all the hashes that I've ever cracked, and I have no idea why. I think it's because I deleted the one in my home directory, but I didn't delete the one in the root directory, and now it's getting all the passwords from the root directory whenever I run John. So if I deleted the one in the root directory, then it would probably all be fine. Anyway, you can see there all the passwords that you've ever cracked. So if you're trying to do a report, you can come back to here and you can cut out all these passwords and put it into a report. So you don't need to worry about memorizing them or taking your tool output. You just grab them from the John.pot, put them into your report, although you probably might actually want to redact the actual passwords unless you're trying to prove how easy it was to hack and that they're using passwords with very low complexity. I've barely scraped the surface on what John the Ripper can do. Again, it has so many tools that you can get with Jumbo John. So there's a tool that will get a password hash for a zip file. I believe it's called Zipped John, and there's one for a RAR archive as well, password protected RAR archives. I think it's called John RAR to John or something to that effect. And what it will do is it will look at the file, it will get the password hash from it, and then you can crack it, and then you'll be able to get into that zip file or RAR archive. And again, I've only really looked at the word list options, but I believe that's going to be enough to sort of get you going. There's a lot more to it, and you should definitely get into it and look into the other options like the incremental options and the single crack modes. But the word list option, I feel, is going to be the most commonly used one that you'll need to use on sort of pen test jobs. If you're able to get a dump of hashes, whether it's from like a backup found in like an unsecured NFS directory or something like that, then the word list option is probably going to be good enough to see you through. You'll be able to put those hashes into single files into one file itself and tell it to crack. And there's a lot more to it that I haven't explained. Like there's hashes like NTLM hashes and things like that that you could catch with repeater that you could then crack. You know, if you're performing a man-in-the-middle attack or sniffing network traffic somehow, then you could capture these hashes and crack them with John. Now, John is great. It's an old program from 1996, but they have continued to update it. and it does primarily use the CPU. And I know a lot of you are going to be saying, well, why don't you use Hashcat? Well, no, I love Hashcat. Hashcat's great too. It does use the GPU if you get the drivers configured correctly, but John the Ripper, it's an age-old tool like Cain and Abel, you know. It's got a fond place in my heart, and if you're just trying to crack a few passwords there, like, you just saw how quick it was. I hadn't cracked those hashes before, but because the word list, or because the actual password was in the word list, the CPU churned through it and gave me the password. And this is on a virtual machine, so I don't even have all the cores available. I don't have all the processing power available of my actual machine that I'm running the virtual machine on. But it's just a great tool to use if you want to try and crack a few password hashes. Granted, if it's not in rocku.txt, you can use the incremental cracking type methods, but again, those could take forever if we don't actually know the rules, the complexity requirements of the password. But John the Ripper is a fantastic tool, and it's one I use all the time whenever I find a password hash, or whether I'm doing capture the flag challenges. I will go to John the Ripper first. I'm going to do a video on Hashcat in the future, how to set it up. I currently have it installed on my base and I'm using it for Windows. I'm having a few issues with the drivers, but yeah, this video was a focus on John the Ripper. Hashcat will probably be one of the next videos I do in the tools scenario, but check it out, get it installed. This is a great tool and it deserves a lot more love. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. Kind regards.